going in the other direction. Welsey has to stay seated, and he has to stay composed. So he cannot afford to get in time trouble. The games will begin soon, but it's not fun in games when you're facing Magnus Carlsen.
It's never fun, but it is a big challenge and so much at stake for these two players. Welsey, so down a set, has to win this set to take it to the third and the final one for Magnus Carlsen. He is looking for his third title win in the Champions Chess Tour, and we're off.
We're off, and Welsey, so back to 1b3. Surprise here. Will Magnus have prepared for this? I mean, that looks like a double bluff, Robert.
He made me eat my words. Yesterday does not seem so far away because we have a repeat. And for the second day in a row, Magnus pauses. He is trying to collect himself and determine what to play against this first move. So, Tanya, are you surprised that Magnus is spending precious seconds here?
I am loving this. 1b3 after what happened yesterday, though Welsey did not get into any trouble out of the opening. It was an equal battle. And Magnus choosing a similar setup from set one, the 𝗧𝗏𝗃 that we saw. David, put yourself in Magnus's mind right now. You're facing this 1b3. We've been calling it, well, the playing for the memes opening. How are you reacting?
Well, I think Magnus, he's played so many meme-type openings throughout his own career that he'll just not be too phased, and he will, as he's shown in the game so far, just try to react in a similar vein to yesterday, where he just established a very solid position, no real weaknesses, and was able to later equalize. Here, play is transposing back towards more conventional, more traditional waters. White is ready to 𝗧𝗏𝗃 both bishops, so both bishops on the longest possible diagonals for White. Magnus has got one of his own, but it will be a fight for those central squares. So Magnus now just mulling over how to react. I think he just wants solidity, Magnus Carlsen. He doesn't want to punish Welsey for this opening choice.
And a good change by Welsey from a day ago, because now he's 𝗧𝗏𝗃ing his light squared bishop first. Yesterday, Magnus was actually able to play b6 and bishop b7 to get his light squared bishop on the board's longest diagonal. So Welsey is playing a slightly different move order, which has different consequences. There are always nuances in every single turn. And you see that Magnus, he's adopting more of a King's Indian style, playing in the center of the board.
And Welsey did adopt the 1b3 against 𝗧𝗏𝗃 as well. It worked to perfection in that one. It was a miniature by Welsey. We saw him play the same opening in set one against Magnus. That ended in a draw, but no one, I think very few, were actually expecting a repeat of that in set two as well. So Welsey getting the mind games going there. And as Robert said, for the light squared bishop that Magnus has, it's impossible to 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗃 it on b7 like it happened yesterday. So looking at the other diagonal, he pushes the pawn in front of the queen. White looking to expand in the center here?
At some point, I believe so. But as soon as you expand to the center, you restrict the scope of your bishops, because pawns, you want them in the center. And they always say a bad bishop usually defends a good pawn. So you can happily push forward, in the center. And we see that Welsey, he takes a calmer approach, a little bit of a quieter approach. David, does that surprise you at all?
Very much so. And we saw Magnus just look away from the board briefly after that move. A slight frown before he goes back to that poker face Magnus Carlsen. But this one, again, it feels a bit indecisive. I think Welsey's just trying to stay flexible, but it does allow Magnus to build in the center. Magnus has a bit more space in the middle of the board right now with Black's pawn formation. Welsey, he's just put his knight on a really, really flexible square. And watch out for White's pawns. White's D pawn in the center, White's F pawn. They can challenge the head of Black's pawn chain. So I like the approach from Welsey. So it feels like he's already kind of trying to force himself into this mindset of a must-win situation. But it is a bit provocative. It is a bit risky. It is a full-blooded fight now, where having the advantage of the white pieces, having that extra first move, doesn't really count for too much. So I think reasons to be happy for both sides. It's a real fight. But Welsey, he's just trying to play chess, as we say.
And with the location of his knight's development in front of the king, as you were highlighting, David, that White has a choice of which pawn to push to challenge for the center. I think the F pawn will go forward, especially once White castles. And we see Magnus, he's shaking his head. He's like, all right, not so bad. That looks okay. But he needs to figure out a plan, because what Welsey is doing is he's mixing things up, and he's also securing a lead on the clock. And we've seen in most games, the player that has the advantage in terms of how much time they have left, that's usually paid dividends for them.
Just playing really tentatively, not really wanting to play kind of principled moves, and now he's just being punished.
Threat is stronger than its execution. Magnus Carlsen keeps all the threats on the board against the c5 pawn, tactics on f2, and Welsey so in deep trouble with just a minute on the clock. But Magnus as well coming down to those seconds. He needs to finish this.
He does, and I think he can steal the pawn on c5. That's step one. That white rook can barely escape. It was a good point to note that that rook doesn't have very many moves remaining. But I'm curious what Magnus is thinking about. Is he looking for a follow-up, or is he actually looking to end the game on the spot with something tactical, whereas he can just snag the pawn and be happy?
Yeah, it feels like Magnus now, his clock time is the main thing. It is Welsey So's major hope right now. It's the only thing that could trip him up, Magnus Carlsen, because just take a pawn off the board. You're up on material. There we go. He captures, forcing the white rook back to an awkward square here, clumsy square, and sooner or later, Magnus can start pushing pawns. Magnus can improve his rook. Still, he has fantastic pieces here as black. Maybe he's looking too much for a knockout blow. He doesn't need anything immediate. He's got a long-term advantage.
He's down under 20 seconds. This is a messy position. He moves his queen back from the square it came from, which was a good decision. The evaluation bar on the left-hand side of the board, it approves. So, Tanya, the time, 20 seconds, are you getting nervous for Magnus, or do you still think is everything under control?
I think it's chaos still. You've got so many minor pieces, and that bishop on a1, as long as it's alive, you've got to watch out for any kind of threats building up against the black king. Right now, Welsey just creating a lift square for his own king, but Magnus's pieces are so dominating. He does fall back with the knight. Feels like because of the pressure on the clock, he's not making the absolute best choices, but still enough to keep things under control.
Enough for now, but he has kind of wasted a bit of time with the black queen. He's retreated the black knight back. That was his best piece. But look at the nerves from Welsey So. He reached out, about to make a move, then tried to hide it. And the nerves are kicking in now. It's the first game of the day. The first game is always the most nervy for both of them as they try to get back in the zone. Welsey finds a great move, trying to trade off the queens. White's queen was passive, black's queen was active. Those pieces off the board, and he can breathe a sigh of relief. So great move, Magnus. Reluctantly, look at Magnus's face suddenly. It's under 10 seconds.
Yeah, he's 5 seconds on the clock. He does trade the queens. He does have the extra pawn, but watch out for that bishop pair. That bishop on a1 gives white long-term compensation. Black's rook stuck on the last rank, defending any checks of rook d8, and now Welsey gets rid of that knight, the key knight on e5 that was blocking the bishop on a1. Welsey moving forward for the initiative.
But I love the way that Magnus is playing this, because now all of his pieces are defended, so he can push his pass a pawn. Welsey has that under control for now, but Magnus, with no time on his clock, he's making sure that some of his decisions will be easier. He will not blunder a piece, at least not yet.
Yeah, the last 5-6 moves have gone in Welsey So's favour in terms of surviving, not losing on the spot, but Magnus is still safe. Magnus still has the extra pawn. Welsey's still nervous, retreating there with the white rook. I'm not sure whether he could have kept it active or not. Either way, now he should be trying to use this momentum. He should be trying to create threats, as he just does against black's bishop, which is slightly loose. Ooh. And Magnus countering by trying to infiltrate with a black rook down to the first rank.
And white's dark square bishop is kind of trapped over there, so knight d3 played, apparently a huge mistake, and Magnus pushes his pawn, giving up his bishop to win a knight. It's a winning advantage because the bishop on a1 is trapped.
And Welsey So, with 2 seconds on the clock, makes a move. He gives a check, comes back with the rook. There's panic, and Magnus picks up another pawn.
Wow, Welsey So missed that one. Frustration visible on his face there. Now 2-pawn advantage for black, and white's remaining pawns are dropping off. 3-pawn advantage for black. This one is winning for Magnus. No time, Welsey So. He made that move with 1 second left. And the black king is too safe.
Welsey barely getting his moves up, but you could see his body language. He's pretty much resigned before he's tipped the king over. He saves his bishop, but those pass pawns for black, they should end the game. Magnus gaining time with every move. 3-second increment, everybody. It's bonus time, and those knights, they're hopping in. And now with the trades, when you're head material, you're happy to see pieces come off the board.
And you can see the relief on Magnus. He knows that he's so close to this one. That rook will jump to the second rank, giving a check. The pawns are marching forward, and with the dark square bishop gone, black's king in absolute safety. And we're going to see the pawns make their way towards white's camp. f3 coming in, and Welsey looks like he's almost on the brink of giving up. You just have to watch out for one threat. That e-pawn, e6, is something that you need to keep under check.
Yeah, and Magnus, okay, he moves his king, but he didn't have too much time either. Still not over this game. Welsey So, he's got one of the pawns back. White's e-pawn still alive. Can he keep the tricks going? And white pawn marches. but I think Magnus has spotted a nice trick here. He will be able to stop this white pawn from promotion.
Oh.
That's beautiful recognition from Magnus. Giving that check so the rook can stop the pawn. And Welsey, now his hopes are pretty much dashed. Black has, what, 3 extra pawns in a rook endgame?
And that e-pawn stop, the a-pawn marches forward, and Welsey knows that this is all over. It's unstoppable. He will have to give up that e-pawn. He tries to create tricks, and he gives up. Welsey so resigns. Magnus Carlsen takes the lead in set 2. What a game with the black pieces, getting the initiative. Welsey guarded, playing cagey at the beginning, and that seemed to cost him a lot.
I think it was overly cautious play from Welsey. So he wanted just a position where he could try to outplay Magnus Carlsen. But look at this man. Does he look like someone who gets outplayed very easily? The answer is absolutely not. So Magnus opened one file.